For compassionate mindful education is going to start, right? Or yeah.
Yes, thank you, Mati, and thank you, Ronnie. It's really, really heartwarming to see this coming together. I'm sorry if there's noise behind me. It's really, really heartwarming to be here with you all. Ronnie mentioned that there's people here from the Northern Hemisphere, the Southern Hemisphere, from the States and from Australia and from Europe. So it means that we have different languages, different time zones. Some of us just woke up. Some of us are just about to go to bed. And you've all taken the time to come and be here with us. And I feel like it's something that hasn't quite happened to our organization yet to have this kind of event. And unfortunately, the circumstance that we're in has brought us together. But I can tell you that from our point of view as a nonprofit in Israel, which is currently 100% dedicated to the crisis that we're experiencing, it's really, really giving us energy to know that we've got such a huge community and such a diverse community with us. It's in times like these that we sometimes find out that we have this bigger community. And I hope that it's not just for us, but also for you tonight to feel that you're part of something stronger and bigger. And we hope to be able to leave you with some insight into what we can all do in this period to help ourselves and to help others. I'd like to thank Laurie Comer for organizing this beautiful opportunity to get together, and to Jamie Goodman and to all of your community from San Francisco. That was the seed that initiated this event tonight. And also welcoming all of our colleagues from WellTech Ventures who have joined us tonight. And thank you for being here. I'll tell you just a tiny bit about the organization. I think many of you here are meeting us for the first time, the Center for Compassionate Mindful Education. So we're a nonprofit based in Tel Aviv, founded in 2014, just after the last war in Gaza, actually. We came together, 5 co-founders. 2 of them are here with me tonight, Mati Lieblich and Dr. Rony Berger. And we actually came together through a pilot that we did, a social emotional learning program co-written by Rony, as well as neuroscientists at the Mind and Life Institute, that was aimed to give students and teachers tools from our world of mindfulness and compassion to, first of all, give a way into well-being after a very difficult period that we've experienced in 2014, and also to help educators to be more compassionate and to raise children in a way that will enable them to be more compassionate citizens in the world. All of our programs since then are based on this research, which shows the tight link between well-being and our ability to be kind to one another. And since that pilot, we've had 9 years of training educators, therapists, and parents who we see as the change agents of, the people who are raising the next generation. So giving them these tools and the knowledge of mindfulness and compassion and social emotional learning. We've done this with teacher trainings at Tel Aviv University, at Bar Ilan University, and also throughout the public sector with the welfare system, with the education system, and with the healthcare system more recently. And just about 5 weeks ago, when the war broke out, we've gathered all of our forces and directed our ability to support these 3 populations of educators, therapists, and parents, obviously, and children and youth, to do what we can to give a little ray of sunshine and knowledge and tools that can get people through this time. We have a beautiful project that is just starting now with the Department of Youth at Risk and the Ministry of Education, where Rony and our team will be giving lectures and workshops to all of their professionals across the country. And we're gathering more funds from you, from our community, and from other partners to enable us to do more and support more and more populations around the country. I'm sure I don't need to say too much about what's going on. You probably know, and you're probably experiencing it from afar as well. And I'm sure Rony will also give many more details. But just to let you know that with your support, we are doing what we can, and we will continue to be here and accompany all of the educators, all of the therapists, all of the parents that wish to learn and to gain skills for well-being, and to also pass them on. I see that Rony Berger, another co-founder, has joined us. And maybe Ricardo is here too. I don't know. If you are here, Dr. Ricardo Tarash is our fifth co-founder. Shami's here, who is our marketing officer and much, much more. And he kind of put together this evening. So it's a very big thank you to you as well. And I think that's all from me. Is there anything more, Mati? Okay, so you are in the very, very best hands of Dr. Rony Berger, who will be giving this talk tonight and giving strategies to cope with continuous stress and trauma and how we can both help ourselves and help others. You're most welcome to stay in touch after this. If you've registered, then we have your email and we can send you, following this talk, the recording and other material that we have in English. And if you haven't registered and you just pressed on the link to join us on Zoom, then I urge you to send us an email with your email so that we can pass on the live stream on Facebook, the recording, and anything else that might come out of this talk tonight. Thank you all for being here, and I hope it's a meaningful evening.
Okay, so I'm taking over. Good evening, everybody, my friends, colleagues around the world. It's wonderful to have you there. I'm gonna start a talk without further ado, just simply because I know it's late for some colleagues here in Israel. So I'm gonna put my PowerPoint. I hope you see it. Specifically, if you need to ask me private question, or if I haven't been able to answer some of your questions, you have my email. It's bergerrony@gmail.com. You'll get it anyway. So the PowerPoint, if you want, we will send you that too. Okay, so I want to say just a few words where I'm coming from. I know a lot of people know me, but I'd still say I'm a clinician working with children, adults, and families who experience stress and trauma, both on a war and terror and a civilian situation. I also work, I would call myself a humanitarian work because I've been in almost all the major disaster, be it war, terror, or natural disaster in the past, I'd say 40 years, even going back into Columbine shooting, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, 9/11, et cetera, and in the Africa and Asia, et cetera, where we designed actually resiliency program that I'm very proud to say is has been translated to 18 languages and used even currently in Ukraine, the last place that I've been in. And we work with, emergency personnel, using consulting with government agencies and trying to work with those who had been helping others to help them prevent burnout and compassion fatigue. I teach in medical school and social work school in Tel Aviv University. And occasionally I do research when I have time around the impact of major disaster and population and resiliency program for children. trying to promote pro-sociality. I want to talk about my experience at work because this is really relevant to the current situation. People that know me know that I would have been the first one to go down, which I did. And I worked with the worst affected kibbutzim and moshav. These people experience really horrific atrocities. I'll give you just one example because I don't want to sort of expose you to things that are really unbelievable. I've been in many, many disasters. In Haiti, where 250,000 people die, in Sri Lanka after the tsunami, thousands of people die, but I've never, ever been exposed to such horrific situation. I'll give you an example of a seven-year-old girl who I met in the first day. She came from a kibbutz that had been affected, and she told me the story of how she sort of fought with the tourist in the safe room with her parents. And as they entered the room, they shot in front of her a father and her mother. And she tried to resuscitate her mother, that were bleeding. And the Hamas terrorists just kicked her away and sort of laughed at her for doing it. This is a type of atrocity we have seen. I'm not going to tell you about all the gang rapes that some people told me about. Those are eyewitnesses. That are not stories. Or about a pregnant woman who they stabbed straight in the belly and killed her and shot her in the head. Those stories are the first stories that I've heard. And there is no doubt in my mind that if we want give these people psychological support, we will have in our hands a lot of people who are suffering for a long time. We also work with family of soldier of elite unit who were exposed to the atrocities in the first day. As you know, it took the army a long time before they came in, and those young soldiers not only fought for the risk of their life, but had also seen all these horrific things. And we also work with the Survivor of the Nature party. It was a party a day before, and then the terrorists heard about it and slaughtered 250 young people who were just dancing. This is the type of things that we've been dealing with, as well as dealing with the towns in the south, the road of Hakim and Eviot. You know those places. So I want to talk about the what I call the nature of the current continued traumatic stress. This is a concept that is not often used in a DSM, but to me, it's very prevalent now in Israel. So I say a few words about that, if you don't mind. The first thing that I want to say is the nature and intensity of the events that we have seen are unbelievable. We're not used to that in Israel. Actually 14,000 people were murdered, a lot of people injured, 200 and about 40 people kidnapped, and all these horrific atrocities that we heard of. They told me that they slaughtered whole families. There was a massacre. These things that I've heard reminded me in some ways Holocaust stories. And actually, some of the picture that I saw when I went there, drove there, reminded me of Ukraine. I worked with Ukraine prior to the terrible disaster in Israel. And some of the sites were very similar in the south. But I think the most difficult dilemma in Israel right now is what I call the severance of the sense of safeness and protection. See, a lot of people down in the south, in the kibbutzim and moshavim, waiting for the army to help them. And we heard it in the TV, a lot of people calling friends, hours on end, where the terrorists were ransacking their homes, but nobody came. And they said, we were abandoned. Everything is falling apart. And it's interesting because even in people that I work with in the center tell me the same story. All of a sudden, they feel they're not protected. I live in Tel Aviv. In my neighborhood, people, sort of hired a security company that goes with guns in the street. It's a bit unrealistic, I think, but still, the sense of security has gone away for people. Top of that, the chaos of the government agencies. Up till today, most of the work had been done by the civil society. The government are slowly getting together, but still many leaders and ministers didn't go to the people, didn't talk to them. It was a total chaos. and the people said to me, there's no one we can trust. The government is totally dysfunctional. That is the context that we are dealing with. Further than that, we're still in the middle of it, in the middle of the security situation. We are told by people and by the army that it may take long months and even years to deal with the Hamas. So put that together, all these components, and you see the apocalyptic reality that a lot of people in Israel are currently experiencing, even if they weren't in the South, okay? And so I'm going to talk today about two types of population. The first population is the first circles, is the population who experience what I call acute traumatic stress. And they are likely to develop post-traumatic symptoms of various kind. I'll say a few words about them, and then I'm going to talk. I talk fast, so you can stop me if I'm too fast. I just want to give you a lot of information, if you don't mind. And the second population is what I call those who experience continued traumatic stress, and those are the general public. Most of them are going to develop some problems, and we, as an NGO, have to find ways by which to deal with them. So I'm going to talk about the first group, those in the first circle, meaning those who are either in the South, hiding from the terrorists, losing neighbors, friends, or have part of the family that were kidnapped. I'm going to talk about them, and then I'm going to talk about the public in general. So let me talk about the progression of symptomatology. I will do it sort of fast, but I think it's very important to understand what we're encountering psychologically, and I hope that will make sense to most of you. So in the first hour of days, those who are in the first circles, and even the general public, experience what we call ASR, which acute stress reaction. Those are transient reaction, and we assume that about 70 to 85% of the people, not only in Israel, I'm basing it on data around the world, experience anxiety, nervousness, mild flashbacks, just, difficult of sleeping, and some avoidance. Again, this is transient, reaction, and by, I'd say, a few weeks, people are back to normal. But there is a group of people who will not develop that, and we're talking now in the first months, between 2 days and 4 weeks. We call it acute stress disorder. Pay attention, we are talking now about this disorder, not just transient reaction. And those are the people who experience really significant symptoms of intrusion, flashback, nightmares, avoidance of different situations, very significant mood swings, could be either depressed or energetic, hyperarousal, very much on waiting for what would happen. Usually we assume in general disaster, particularly earthquakes and that sort of thing, that there is about 20%. In this case, because we're dealing with human evil, we assume that about a third of the population, between 25 and 35, every third person that were in the first circle would experience acute stress disorder, meaning there'll be very significant, symptoms who will, unfortunately, some of them, we assume about 50%, will go to the next level, which that name, PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder. And that is the same symptoms, but since they happen for weeks already, they really affect, their functioning. So we're talking about intrusion, numbing, avoidance, mood swings, sleeping problems, significant ones, outbursts, total response. All of those responses will affect their well-being. And those people, if they're not treated, they will develop eventually chronic PTSD. We don't know the exact how many of them. So we need to catch them. Actually, in the first, chronic PTSD is really a very significant disorder. It affects their occupational, ability, their relationship, etc. So what we need is to catch them, and we are now in the window where we need to intervene very fast and work for them so they won't move into PTSD, and even if they would, they won't develop chronic symptoms. This is the first line of people who experience the worst situation, okay? Now, I'm not going to go into clinical stuff to tell you what to do. I'll do it in general, and I'll try to say what we, as an NGO, are willing to do for those folks, and then I'm going to talk about the public. again, I'm moving fast and you can stop me wherever, and that's my style. You know, an hyperactive kid can be a very productive adult. So you see a hyperactive person who moves into strong action. All right. We're at risk for the question that raises, that many of us raise, we're at risk of developing post-traumatic symptomatology when they encounter such a terrible event. So this is important to us because not everybody will develop that. But we need to find the ones who develop it. And let me share with you what we know from both the data, empirical data, and our experience. Before the traumatic event, there are some signs that we know of some certain people who may be developing real problems. The first thing is attachment problem. Attachment is the relationship between a child and a parent. We know that parents that are neglectful and abusive, these kids have not developed good affect modulation skills, meaning it's very hard for them to control their emotion once they encounter a very difficult situation. But this is one group. The second group is those who are encountered past traumas. By the way, past traumas are not necessarily related to the particular situation that we have currently in Israel. It could be sexual abuse, it could be car accidents, etc. Unprocessed past traumas are a risk factor. Again, when I say a risk factor, I don't mean everyone will end up with very significant symptoms, but we need to watch them and make sure they are okay. Then we have psychological and behavior problem. That's obvious. People who haven't dealt with life well before are at risk. And we also know that family trauma, for example, intergenerational transmission. We know that second generation Holocaust survivors like myself are more likely to develop problems when they encounter a trauma. Okay, now these four elements or factors we cannot change. This is part of the past. What I'm going to tell you now is really, really important because these are things that happen right after the event or during the event. The most important thing that we know that highlight the possibility that people will develop post-traumatic disorders are acute reactions that are maintained in intensity and duration during the time. So what we need to find out is how the symptomatology develop within times. What happens after a week, what happens after 2 weeks, and what happens now after 5 weeks. Now, if we see that the symptomatology, flashback, avoidance, all the things that I've told you, a sleeping problem, have not been improved within time, or even worsened, those are the people who are really at risk of being stuck and will not go on to cope well, and we need to treat them. I'll tell you a few words about what we do with them. Then there is acute physiological problems. Fainting, cortisol level probably doesn't matter because nobody will take a blood test to know it, or high rate of people in the first days. So we know that if people are physiologically very affected, chances are they might, that's not for sure, develop post-traumatic symptoms. We also know that dissociative reaction, dissociative is sort of so disconnected from people, or people who do not believe it's true, people detached in a way. Those are dissociation, professionals call them. And when people are disconnected to what happened, like the girl that I told you, the 7-year-old that told me about a mother, and she told me as if it didn't happen to her, I'll be very concerned about her. And finally, the last thing is avoidance reaction. People close themselves. They do not want to see people, avoid things. Those are at risk, okay? So what I'm trying to present now is simply to say there are people that experience trauma directly, first circle, and we need to watch them. And the question is, what do we do with them? How do we help them not go on to develop PTSD and even chronic PTSD within time? Okay? So let me tell you in very normal terms, I've given you the DSM, the nosology of disaster psychiatric, but there's one way that I present to people in a simple way what is essentially PTSD. And I call PTSD the following. Just to me, it's an abduction of the present by the past and shutting down the future. Think about it. What are flashbacks? Flashback or nightmares are events from the past that enter the here and now. And people that develop this disorder experience them as if they are happening right now. So if we can really process the past and live in long-term memory rather than have it in a here and now, people will be okay. Now, they won't forget this horrific atrocities that they have been exposed to, but at least they won't relive them on a daily basis. And that's really very important, okay? So how do we deal with survivor who experience post-traumatic stress disorders or post-traumatic symptomatology? Well, by and large, and I'm not giving now a speech about treatment, but I would say we need to process their traumatic experience. Usually we do that by exposing them back in a very optimal condition, treatment situation, into the experiences, and there are many strategies to do that. And then we facilitate the consolidation of their intrusive memories. In other words, we send their intrusive memories into long-term memory, okay? We can do it mentally. It's not what we do as surgery in their brain. And then we reduce their post-traumatic symptoms. If we can do that two things together, we can move people that are experiencing a lot of symptoms in the first months or two, and then we can move them into actual good functioning. And one word about what we are doing for these folks from the first circle in our NGO. And I would say what we are doing is essentially trying to take what Moria said, the social emotional program that we developed, the call to care, and trained our staff in trauma sensitive strategies. We've done it already. We have about 70 people ready to help people in this house. You know, they're building now for the people who were affected, directly affected, from the kibbutzim and the moshavim, and even the towns, new schools, because they can go there. They can go back to the places. And, we will employ people in these schools, teach the teachers how to deal with those folks in a very sensitive way, and hopefully help them to some degree process the trauma and become more resilient, develop a resilient program. We also work, as Moria said, with vulnerable youth in the house. And this is really very important group because they had trauma before that. And now that they have experienced all this, terrible situation, we want to give them skills by which they can deal with the situation. So all in all, this is just one group, the first circle. Let me move on, if that's okay with you, into the public in general, because we really are concerned about the public as well. Okay? Any question by now? Have I been pretty clear? I know that I move fast. Yeah? Let me tell you how we deal with the public experiencing on what I call continual traumatic stress. Let me introduce the concept in general, and then we can talk about it. By the way, I will leave enough question in the end. That's why I'm running fast, so that you can ask me any question that you want, what we do, how to treat people, etc. Okay. Sorry for giving you this, vision, but some people feel that way right now, trying to take their air out. Now, for our Canadian friends, you probably don't remember this guy. He's from the 40s, but he's the father of the stress response, and his name is Hans Salier, but it's actually Hungarian. And I present him because I want to talk about stress and how stress affects the public, if you don't mind. Now, he framed one sentence that is very important. He said, it's not the stress that kills us, it's our reaction to it. Now, this is one way pretty optimistic, because if we know how to deal with stress, then we can really not be affected as much as we potentially could be affected, okay? And he also framed this concept of general adaptation syndrome. By the way, he was an endocrinologist who studied in, I think, Montreal, or maybe Toronto, I'm not sure. And he basically wanted to know something about hormones. He wasn't a stress guy at all in the beginning. And he found out by mistake that all of his rats, at that time rats, the white ones, were very expensive, died, and he didn't know why. And by mistake, he found out that the section that he housed them, the air condition, the warming system didn't work, and they were frozen to death. And then, but then he find out that some other rats died for other reason, and he sort of surgically looked at them, and he saw the inflation of the adrenal gland. So he said basically they were stressed. Now, he talked about 3 stages of stress. This is very relevant to us, and I want you to try to pay attention to that. The first response is the alarm response. Now, we all alarmed. Our body is get ready to fight stress. We all, have the sympathetic response, and we're okay in the first stage. Then when the stress is going on, like what's happening right now in Israel, we have alarms, there is missile shooting, etc., we go to resistance. Biologically, it means that our secretion of different hormones, cortisol, adrenal, all the stress hormones that are emitted through the body, really help us to cope with that. And we are in good shape if we are in the bluish area. But the point is that if the thing goes on and on and on, we move into the exhaustion stage. And in the exhaustion stage, the same type of processes, biological processes, start to hurt the body. And I want to tell you what happened when, a lot of us will be, for a long run, stay in stress. What happened to people? So I'm going to show you, I'm going to talk first about continuing stress, and then I'm going to show you what I wanted to show you biologically, if you don't mind. All right. So what is continuing traumatic stress? Most people that are in the first circle and experience traumatic stress develop symptoms. Now, symptoms from an evolutionary point of view are pretty adaptive, because when we have sympathetic responses like, breathing fast, sweating, all these things get us to deal with a potential threat that is currently present. So it's good that we have all the hormones secreted and all the sympathetic response. Okay? However, when the threat is no longer exists, the post-traumatic symptoms that remain become a disorder, because it's like a false alarm. If the threat goes away, we're no longer needing all this, running fast, having secreted all this hormones. We don't need that. But if it continues, like situation in a continuous stress, and the threat is not around, or if it is around for a long time, we start to develop things like anxiety, despair, somatization, somatic responses, etc., etc. So basically, what I'm suggesting is the word allostatic is the opposite of homeostasis. Our body is very smart. When it is out of shape by whatever situation, we know how to modulate ourselves, and we don't have to think about it. But when it goes on and on and on, we have what we call allostatic load, which basically is this thing that help us start to wear and tear our body. And that's what I'm concerned about, okay? So I'm going to skip it, and I'm going to really tell you what I think happened when there is a continued traumatic stress. First of all, our brain is affected. We feel fatigued. There is reduced concentration. There is decreased mood. Our heart really beats fast. And if you have heart problems, it will increase that. There is an effect on our gut, the absorption try to change. There's different levels of, what we call leaky gut. Muscles are getting, during very significant stress, the protein sort of break down, and the muscle that are in some way, I would say, reducing their level of tonus. Skin problem, by the way, we've seen that already when we go to the hotels where the kids and adults from the moshavim and kibbutzim, the ones who were directly affected, we see already, signs of, health problem, more allergies, immune system start to reduce, and people have more of inflammations of sorts, hormone change, etc., etc. So long-term stress really affect the body significant. And I want to tell you a few things. I don't want to exhaust you with data, but I'll tell you a few things that we can do about it. But before that, let's talk about the different level of symptomatology that happen, okay? From a physical point of view, as I pointed, there is an increase in sweating, dizziness, blood, etc., etc. But the most important thing is the exhaustion, somatization, autoimmune diseases, and headaches and stuff of that nature. That is the type of continuous long traumatic stress that affect us, okay? Let's talk about emotional stuff. So in the beginning, we feel anxiety, anger, mood swings, etc. But when we go on with the stress on a long time, we start to feel different feeling, like we become despondent. And I hear people talk about it in Israel now. Feeling of guilty. Why didn't we do anything? This is really something interesting that I see also from the people in the first circle. Even those who fought the terrorists and were able to save a lot of people also have a feeling of what we call survival guilt. They're the ones who feel that they haven't done enough, and why did I survive and not other? We see that, and that is a real problem we need to deal with. And helplessness and hopelessness, this is part of the long-term emotional factors that we see during continued traumatic stress. From a cognitive level, there's all kind of symptoms, but to me, the most important ones is attention and concentration start to change. Forgetfulness. I had few clients that came to me and forgot, the address, telling me we forgot the address. We are sort of besides ourselves. Negative scripts. People really talk about the fact that they dream about different situation. Israel is falling apart. Terrorists are coming to towns. And the thing that really bothered me, I had a friend from Sderot, a town that is affected, who's talking to me about, I don't care if I don't. I don't care if, the country is okay. I don't care. This is a sense of nihilism that we see when we see people really standing long-term stress and trying to cope with that. So I'm really pointing to the problem that may affect. And in the beginning, on a behavioral level, we see eating problem, avoiding, sleeping problem. But to me, the worst situation is irritability. We see a lot of youngster adolescents start to smoke and do drugs in order to deal with the situation. And a sort of people starting to move away from other. Again, this is not everybody, but I'm pointing out to the fact that we need to do something with the public on a general level. And I've been given a lot of webinars and talks about that because I think that we have to find a way to stabilize people and give them some relaxation methodologies. So I talk a lot about this, and let me be very specific what we can do and what we are doing now in Israel. If that's okay with you, I leave you time to ask questions. All right, let's be very specific what we can do. I'll skip that. I'll talk about tools for relaxation and stabilization. The first thing is vagal breathing. You can do all vagal breathing. Vagal breathing is deep belly breathing. You inhale and get the air below the diaphragm, and sort of your belly is blowing out, and then you very slowly exhale. Why this is very important to the current situation? Because here is the beautiful vagus. You see it's a bundle actually of nerves. What's important about the vagus is that it's going on from the brainstem, you see it, and it's innervated to all the organs in the body. Now, I'm not going to teach you now biology lesson, but what I want to say is that one of the major function of the vagus, of the nerves, is it kicks the relaxation system, the parasympathetic nervous system, gives a signal the body to relax. And how does it give it? Through a particular way of breathing. And that's why we call it vagal breathing. So here is what I will teach you. And by the way, this is relevant to any stress that you encounter. So all of you here can do the breath. And I recommend that to do it on a daily basis, about 10 breaths. And what we do is we start through breathing through the nose. By the way, you can breathe through the mouth, but if you breathe through the mouth, which is a large hole, you may oxygenate your brain too much and you'll feel dizzy, so don't do it. Breathe through the mouth, inhale, bring it below the diaphragm into the belly, hold it a second or two, and then what's important is that you breathe out, okay? Very slow exhalation. When you breathe out, you kick the parasympathetic nervous system, and you relax. The guys in Stanford, by the way, Alan probably know them, had also suggested that you breathe through your lungs. So you breathe both to your belly and to the lungs. There's new research coming into that. Now, this is very simple. It doesn't solve all our problem. It doesn't solve all the stress, but it's important to get the body in shape. So what I do is I teach kids the same thing, not only all of us. So one way to do it with young kids is to ask them to count the breath. Inhale, hold it, and exhale. 1. Another technique, which is, we call it the van exercise. We give them this little, toy, the van, and they inhale, they swing the vein, and that way they learn how to do it. My favorite is the flower and the candle. We tell them in one hand, you have a flower, very smelly one, and the other hand, you have a candle, and you inhale all this, the good smell, and you flip the, flame of the, candle. And you can also have another one if you want, just another sort of little game is you ask the kids to hold their hands and you tell them, breathe in, and they go through the hand up, hold it, and then go down and go hand by hand. This is really sort of a playful way in which to teach young kids how to do it. And we do it in schools. And when you come to schools in Israel, if you ever come, you'll see many of the kids doing it and really start to calm their bodies. Okay, that's one way in which we're dealing. Let's go to the next one, muscle relaxation. Do you know that essentially when you're very stressed, your entire musculature becomes very tense? And there is a reflex of the body that is very simple. When you tense a muscle and then very slowly flex it, the tonus of the muscle are lower than when you started with. And so there are many, many styles of muscle relaxation. And we develop a simple one. I'll show you that. People do the Jacobson method, which is a 25-minute, 30 minutes. We don't have time for that. We do it in 5 steps. One step that you see here. And if you don't see, I'll send you the PowerPoint. We start by squeezing our face and then our jaw. And then we move into the hands and we straighten the hands and make a fist. And we slowly, by the way, one principle that is important to say right now is when you strengthen the muscle and flex it, the flexion should be double the time. So you can tighten the muscle for the count of 3 or 4, and then you flex it to the count of 6 or 8, double the time. It takes more time for the muscle to get back to their normal state. Then the 4th step is where you go into the shoulder and you bring your shoulder up, and then very slowly you relax it. And the last part is the legs. You straighten the legs, and if you put your toes into the floor, you strengthen the bottom of your feet towards your head, the toes, the calves, and you can do it this way. And then you end up with a vagal breath. It takes about 5 minutes, and kids can do it. It'll be rather easy to do it. And so we think this is helpful. Give you few more things, and then I'll stop, if you can handle all my fast talking. The next level is a safe place. I would have loved to do with you. If we have time in the end, I'll show you. This is basically a guided imagery. Now, the guided imagery of a safe place is not very relevant to people who were evacuated from the kibbutz and moshav because they don't have a place. So we have to be very careful. And sometimes we tell them, you go to a calm place. And the way we do it is we ask them to pick up a realistic place. I'm just teaching you very fast how to do that. When we have time, we'll do it. And they imagine a place that is calm, that is safe in the past. And then we ask them to utilize all their senses. We tell them, just as you imagine and bring the picture to your mind, you can see the colors and the places, and you can hear the voices of the place. You can sense the place, the sensorium, you can sense the place in your body. If it's a warm place, how the warmth in your body, etc., etc. You can even smell and feel the odors of the place. And even if you ate there, the taste of the place. Why do we do it? Because it strengthens the imagery. And then we do what we call anchoring. Anchoring is a very simple technique where you really imagine a picture. It's as if you take a selfie there, or you take a picture of the place, and you can use the picture in order to help people who are hyper aroused, who feel very tense, to lower their intensity when they think about a terrible thing. Or you can have a somatic anchor. A somatic answer, when you are in that space where you feel calm, just notice where it is in your body. And whenever you feel that part in your body, you will be calm again. And we give them a suggestion that they will experience the anchor and will feel better again. This is a very simple technique, but I use it also for people who have PTSD when they're hyper aroused. Meaning, if they retell the story and go back to the place where the tourists were and are very, very upset, and I can see how the body with the sympathetic nervous response is sort of hyper aroused, I oftentimes stop them, tell them to go to the safe place, and then I continue. Because when you process memories in an hyper aroused stage, you can re-traumatize people. We want to be very careful about that. I skipped that. Maybe I will now go back to that if I can go. Whoops. I'll show you something that I skipped that I think is important, at least for professionals. It will be a second. Here you go. Just a second, give me. Here you go. You see, this is an important, let me see if I do it. Can you see the picture, by the way? Oh, I'm going fast. Sorry about that. Sometimes when you try too much, that's what happens. Here we go. You see, it's very important when people retell the stories, traumatic stories, that they stay in the green side place. Green place is the place where they are somewhat aroused, but they are not over aroused. When they go in the sort of pinkish area and they feel the threat, they're hyper aroused. If you stay there a long time, you actually traumatize the people. So when they go into very high level of arousal, we need to bring them back. The same thing with the sort of bluish place when they tell the story, like the girl, the 70-year-old girl that I told you, without being connected to the story, when they're sort of collapsed. They're also, we can re-traumatize the people because they tell the story as if it didn't happen to them. So psychologists need to move people when they recount the stories and go back to them into the green level. So that's a principle that is very important for a professional to remember, particularly now when they are in the first stages where they process the events. So let me go back and so we had muscle relaxation and safe place. A few more technique and then I'll stop. Okay. The next level is mindfulness. Now I know there are a lot of people here that use mindfulness. Mindfulness is paying attention to the present moment intentionally and non-judgmentally. Now, it's important to understand that when we work with people who experience in the first circle very significant trauma, you have to be very careful. Because if you ask people to close their eyes, oftentimes they will be overly aroused and, flooded with terrible memory. And this is also risky in terms of re-traumatizing. So here is the Canadian people can be proud again. David Trevelyan, who wrote a book by the name of Trauma-Sensitive Mindfulness, basically suggests that we need to be very careful. I'll give you a few tips if you do it. Basically, defining what is mind. He said there is 4 R's. You have to realize what you're doing. You have to recognize that people can be sensitive, you have to respond, and you have to avoid re-traumatizing. So some of the tips. First, you can do mindfulness without closing your eyes. That helps us to be in the here and now. You can do mindfulness, not with DD, sorry for the mistake there, not very deep breathing, very gentle breathing, and build it gradually, okay? And the most important part is using anchor to ground people when you do this mindfulness. One anchor could be a body scan. When you really sense your body, you feel your feet on the floor when you do these exercises. And I'm talking about people who really were traumatized. They can put one hand on their heart and one hand on the belly and feel the warmth of the body. That also ground them. And the butterfly holding. This is like this, where they can support themselves. This is really simple technique to help people, activate the sense of reality, because people fly away. When they go away, they can go to horrific sites that they happen to remember and get them to be hyper aroused. Okay? All right. We do it in a very simple way. We call it the object exercise. Oftentimes, when people call me in an emergency situation in your hotline, there's, oh my God, I can do it. I hear the terrorist, or I hear the bombs. What's happening? And we tell them, just take a deep breath and look around the room and watch the object that you choose. And just notice the object. And they notice and they see, and then take another object and look at it. Okay. And then another object. In other words, what we ask them to do is to stay in the here and now by bringing different object and focusing on them on the here and now, and not going back into the script of what would happen because they hear certain thing and they feel certain thing, etc., etc. That is if they are protected in the safe place. I'm not talking if terrorists are coming to the room, then they have to be really careful. And it's good that they are hyper aroused, because we need that in order to protect ourselves. So this is very fast on mindfulness. I'll give two more techniques, and that is practice self-compassion. Self-compassion is extremely important, because oftentimes, as I pointed to you, even people who weren't down the SARS in Israel tell me they feel guilty and they feel that they cannot enjoy themselves. How can we enjoy ourselves when people are kidnapped? How can we enjoy ourselves when people have lost people? And I say to them, no, we got to really find ways by which to do some compassionate daily acts for ourselves in order to survive it. We can't stay long-term during stress. So some of the practices, then particularly Mati and I would teach self-compassion, talk about is you plan few pleasurable activity at night before. This is, by the way, a task that I give all my clients. It's nice that they think about themselves positively. And pleasurable activity doesn't have to be heroic activity. It can be very simple, like talking to a good friend, having a good meal, sitting, by the beach, whatever they can do. Second, compassion duvet. One of my favorite people is Paul Gilbert, who's now in the hospital. He's a professor in Britain. He developed compassion-focused therapy, and he called it compassion duvet. Duvet, under the bed. And it's funny because he's English, so in Israel, duvet will not be relevant because it'll be too warm now in the summer to use duvet. The idea is to, before you go and wake up, take a minute, relax. You can meditate, you can breathe, and do it this way. You can start the day with several vagal breathing. You can drink your coffee or tea, or whatever you drink, with some breath. You can smile. I usually wake up and before I brush my teeth, believe it or not, I look at the guy in front of me and do it this way. Oftentimes I go with my dog and meet people in my neighborhood and say hello to them. They smile. This is really American. Most Israelis do not do it, but it's a nice way to acknowledge the environment and to get connected with people. Savoring, just a small thing in life, seeing the flowers around you, basking in accomplishment that you have, anticipated future joys, things of that nature. Practice gratitude. I tell people in Israel when I talk to them, listen, yes, that's true, that things are horrible and that we are in the middle of a war, but your kids are okay right now. It's true that other kids are not. You have a house under yourself. I mean, just acknowledge gratitude. You can write diary of gratitude. If you know Bernie Brown will talk a lot about that. You can do different rituals. Get everybody in your family to talk about how really thankful they are for the situation, etc. And you can write a compassionate letters to yourself or to your friend. Okay. Well, all right. Just one more thing, and that is action. Listen, this is really important to the public because a lot of people sit in front of the TV, which is constantly, all the time on, and they see these horrific stories that people tell. Some of it are heroic stories, but I say under heroic stories, oftentimes you have very, very traumatic stories. And, just to listen to that is not that good all the time. What you need is to sort of modulate the amount of time you expose to, TV and also to media. Media, you have horrific story, and kids are exposed to this TikTok and to Instagram on this horrible. Many of them are fake stories, and we need to limit that. And you can do meaningful things by helping soldier, by helping your neighbor, elderly people, etc. And even if you don't do meaningful thing, it's really important to use your body. Because if you stay sort of during stress without using your body, eventually you're going to be, having problem in your body. All right. After this big run that I gave you, I'm stopping and wanting to hear questions or comments or anything you want. Here we are. Are there any major difference in response between experienced trauma and secondary trauma? Of course. Those of you who don't know what is secondary trauma is usually a trauma that either you experience because you are a helper, be it an emergency person or a therapist hearing the story, or maybe secondary by looking at the TV. Interestingly, those of you in United States might know well that about 5% of the people in California during 9/11 develop, post-traumatic symptoms simply by watching the, Twin Tower fall down. So yes, there are differences. Usually the symptomatology is less significant in duration and intensity. But I would say that when I work with people during this situation, my staff as well, I'm very careful to make sure I do some debriefing and give them some tasks that they can do in order for them to not develop that. When I worked in Sderot with group, and there were a lot of missiles falling down, we had a lot of terrible stories. Every night was an Argentinian group. We talked to people, we laughed. Black humor is not bad. And since they were Argentinian, we have an asado, And those of you who are not into the meat, that's okay. So it's not Argentinian background. So I think it's important to deal with this. Can you please expand how to help people process their traumatic memory? Well, the person who asked the story, do they have about 10 hours now? It's really a complex answer. I will say the following in a simplified way. I said that processing a traumatic experience for people who really develop symptomatology, I will say that in a different way, which would be interesting. Most of us who have been during a traumatic experience, we'll talk to our friends and we'll share our experience. And in that way, naturally or spontaneously, they will process the experience. The one who I pointed out were at risk need certain aid. And the way we deal with that, essentially during the therapeutic setting, is first to make sure that they trust us, because trust is being compromised very early on. Secondly, what we do is expose them gradually and slowly to the event, but we do it by asking them to remember it and to tell it. But before we do it, at least I want to make sure that they have strategies to modulate their arousal, meaning if they go on hyperarousal, if they are being really flooded by feeling, I want to slow down the process. So I will give them some of the things that I just mentioned, vagal breathing, safe place, or whatever technique they do, whether it's bodily or mentally, in order to make sure that they are on a safe place. Because if they are really all of a sudden, and this is true, by the way, to any trauma, it could be also to, sexual abuse, rape, and stuff of that nature. When people start to get back to the experience, particularly those who develop PTSD, they're really easily flooded. And I want to make sure that they're not too flooded, and then, you can process it via different technique. Those of you who are therapists know prolonged exposure by my friend Edna Foa, or EMDR. EMDR is a processing, different ways of retelling the story and working with that. The only thing that I would suggest, and this is really important to me, is that trauma is essentially a somatic experience, meaning a lot of the experience is encoded in the limbic system, which is not verbal. So you need to find some technique to bring the experience in a non-verbal way. And it takes time to do it. And there are different strategies to do it. Peter Levine with somatic experience, other experiences. I don't want to be too clinical and too specific, but I think that it's important to process the experience. And the other thing that is important for those who are stuck is the way they tell the story. Because when people have a narrative in which they are blaming themselves or they feel that they're a victim, I need to reshift it in a way. And there are clinical ways to do it so they really start to appreciate themselves and don't feel guilt and shame. I'm not saying it's easy, but it takes time to do it. Tamara, your hand is raised. Please ask the question. And there are a few others. I'll answer all of them. Go ahead. I want to hear voices, I don't feel I'm alone here.
Okay. I was trying to write something in the chat and I couldn't, so I raised my hand. As therapists, Rony, do you recommend exactly the same techniques that you're recommending for the first circle, second circle? Obviously, we are experiencing second trauma, and we also are experiencing the trauma of being Israeli or being human, of what happened. So do you recommend just doing more of it? What would you say?
I don't think you need, I don't think people, I would assume, I don't know experience, if you had trauma before, you might be rekindling the same trauma. But let's assume you don't. Let's assume you're affected like all of us here by the situation. I think that the stabilization and relaxation techniques suffice to deal with them. And I would use them on a daily basis as I was using them myself. In order for me to stay sane, some people think that I'm not, and that might be partially true, but that's okay. Really. But the thing is that you need to keep yourself. So I go to swim. So I do some meditation in the morning. So I talk to people. So I talk to friends. So I do all of this technique in order to stay sane. And, sadness and stress is part of what we are. We haven't finished this. So to be somewhat alert is reasonable. After all, there are missiles, there are alarms, and to be, sort of a bit attentive is a good thing. It's functional. If you move into places where all of a sudden you don't function, you don't sleep, and unfortunately, I hear a lot. I get about 50 calls a day. I'm not exaggerating, for the past weeks, with people who ask me, what do I do with this and that? Now, some of them has histories of trauma. Some of them have different things. And for them, here and there, suggestion could be useful. But, people get stuck, very stuck. Like, I work a lot with the, survivors of the parties. And the survivors of the parties, relatively young, have really experienced horrible thing because the terrorists really slaughtered them. They sort of ran away from one place to the other. I don't know if you see films about that. And they have really, really, really significant, symptoms. They don't sleep at night, et cetera, et cetera. And, for them, I also use the stabilization and relaxation technique, but part of them will need more specific one-on-one therapeutic, procedures in order for them to relieve it and to work it out and put it in the back of the mind. You don't forget traumas, but you process it in a way that keeps you continue and function. So I don't know if I answered your question. I hope I did. Let's see if there are other questions. Okay. Any other questions that you have? If you want, I'll talk about kids.
I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Hello. Yes, thank you so much, first of all, for the presentation and for being here. And you mentioned the 10-hour training. Do you have 10 hours? So my question is, do you have training in English, the 10-hour training that you keep mentioning for English-speaking therapists?
Well, I do in Ukraine. I did training in Ukraine during the middle of the war for people and to Polish. I haven't done training for any of you. I actually talked to German people. Some of my colleagues or professionals gave them some tips dealing with the stress that they experience and anti-Semitism simultaneously. And I assume some of you experience that too. So the answer is absolutely. I'll be glad to give training if I can find time to sleep. I didn't mention the fact that I start 7 in the morning for the past 5 weeks. I'm not exaggerating, sleeping at 1 o'clock in the morning. So I'll be glad to give training, and I do that constantly. So there are ways to deal with trauma in a more effective way, but it'll take time to sort of outline that. And if there is a need, be my pleasure. Any other questions? Please. Do you have a recommendation on how those of us who work with people who may not understand what's happening in Israel make negative comments about it can work and try to avoid our own traumatization? Look, I think humanity bearing witness is one of the most important things. Oftentimes people tell me, what do I do with people who lost part of the family and the rest of the family has been kidnapped? Well, you can't say much that will relieve their pain. You can bear witness to them, and we know that bear witness, like Lori Laub in Yale, a Holocaust survivor, did a lot of great job around that. Just the fact that somebody, I can tell you that I've been in many, many disasters, and oftentimes I don't even have language because I don't have the language in different people. But when you sit with somebody and they sort of know that you're there with them in your present, that in and of itself is a very important thing. Not everybody needs therapy, but all of us need human contact. And I think human contact is extremely important. And certainly you can give them, you can give support. What we are trying to do is to also have some plan. And this is important for me to say, and I want to mention that. And particularly because we may need your help too. My experience with different disasters around the world is that you have many volunteers in the first stage. We call it the honeymoon stage. And, I'll give you an example, a wonderful example. I worked in Christchurch, in New Zealand. In New Zealand, there were some falling, the earthquake, and they had 5-year plan, mid-range, long range. I think this is really needed in Israel because clearly we have a lot of people. I'll give you one tip. After 9/11, 2,000 people were trained in therapy because there weren't enough training for the 10 million people in New York who've seen people falling from the building, including myself. So my point is we really need to think long-term. And long-term means two things: people, which we have trained and we are happy about it, and money, because the government wouldn't put enough money. So this is really important in long-term planning. And we have to do long-term planning. We cannot leave these people alone. Okay, so any help that we can get would be mostly helpful for us. And I'm not saying that because this is where I'm coming from. I just know from my experience that there is a stage that is called in disaster, philosophy, the disillusionment. The disillusionment is the time when everybody goes, the infrastructure all around, people forget about you. You go now to the hotels and to places where the evacuees is, millions of people are there. They're getting massage, they're getting food, they're getting clothes, they're getting everything. Wait 2 months from now, half of the people will not be there. And it's natural. I don't blame them. Life goes on. My dilemma is, what do we do after 3 months, half a year? We need to take care of these people. We're committed to them and we want to help them because some of the people there will not get back to normal life. And so to me, it's very important to think long term as well, not just to think, what do we do now? Sorry that I sort of fell down on you and kind of, yeah. Any other questions, guys? Let me see if there are other questions in the chat. Can you give an example on how would you use?
Hannah raised her hand. Hannah?
Yes, Anna.
Hi. Thank you so much for this presentation. This was absolutely wonderful. I'm a trauma therapist and mindfulness teacher based out of Michigan in the US, and I love what you're doing. My question is, I think someone else had this question earlier in the chat. As someone in the US right now, how can we help? Like, please let us know if you want help. It sounds like fundraising or like leading mindfulness, like let us know how we can be of service. And I love what you, like the idea of going to different places has honestly been something I've wanted to do years before this war even broke out. So I'd love to connect with you offline too, because that sounds really inspiring. Thanks.
Well, any way you can help. I don't know to what extent, but a lot of people in New York, there's a bunch of therapists in New York, maybe some of them are here, who are trying to, first of all, help people in their communities, because a lot of Israelis are being affected in your own communities. That would be important. But, to come to Israel and to do the Zoom by talking English, some of these people, particularly the ones that we are talking about, are from relatively low socioeconomic classes, in some of the townships down in the south, not everybody, but probably English will not be relevant. So definitely it'd be very helpful if we get donation, because I can't keep all the people who are working full-time in that and leaving their jobs to do it on a long range. So that would be one aspect. The support internationally, and one of the things that I think is important is to explain to people in your communities, which is hard, I know, when they see the building and the kids in Gaza being dead, and that this is hard for me too. But to point to them that we have experienced really horrific things also, and to remind them of the kidnapped people, etc. Maybe if some of you can come to Israel and can help us, that could be also useful. But as I say, since those of you who speak Hebrew certainly can help, but those of you who are not, maybe we do have, actually thinking about that, I do give a few talks to Australian and South African who live in Israel and have soldiers. Some of their sons are soldiers in the army and now in Gaza. That could be helpful. Maybe we can think about how to organize that. And if you're a trauma people, maybe you can, support them either individually or as a group. That might be another thought. I never thought about it. It just came to me now. So that might be a help.
Rony,
that therapist.
Rony, can I say something about that?
Absolutely.
If it's okay. Hannah, I think that what I would say is stay in touch with us. And that's for all of you. If you have any ideas or you just, even just staying in touch with us is helpful. I say that to my friends, and just hearing about people having a normal life, for me, that's very helpful when I'm here. But generally for the NGO, just stay in touch. And we're very happy to hear your ideas or your experience. And so thanks.
Can I just have
Actually, what? Go ahead. Sorry.
Would Russian language help? I'm a trauma therapist. I'm a psychodramatist. I work with trauma a lot, and I'm bilingual, English and Russian. I would like to volunteer and help people in Israel. Would Russian language be helpful?
That might be helpful. I think that I can find a way to get you in touch with people right to us, because I get calls from people who speak Arabic. By the way, we work with Arab also. We haven't really forgotten about our Arab citizens. Some of them are traumatized as well, and it's really important to me to point out that this is important for us. We don't forget about them. And so there are different minorities with different languages. There are olim chadashim, newcomers to Israel, and some of them may not know. So that might be a very important thing, Natasha, that you can help us. That's great. That's a good idea. But I wanted to say something, the follow-up to the comment that Mati said. This is really important. I work with the families of the elite soldiers who were, in the first 2 days in the kibbutz Moshav, risking their life, fighting against the terrorists, but then also seeing this horrific sights. And one of the things that they say that is important is that their children are saying to the parents that it's very important to them to tell them the normality of life that they experience, because it helps them feel strong themselves now that they're down. This is really interesting, because this is the same comment that Mati said about herself. Just knowing the fact that their parents are doing fine is really keeping them in a good shape. And it's really interesting that most of them, despite the fact that they really felt terrible seeing what they saw, when the parents ask them how you doing, they don't share this feeling because they're goal oriented, and it's not the time to share and to really debrief, psychologically debrief what they have experienced. If they are going to Gaza, the worst thing you want is to stop and think what you've seen, and the process you won't be able to function. So many of them, and I explained it to the parents who seem to be a bit upset that they don't share because they assume that they have seen a lot of terrible things. And now they are really, all they are saying to them is, we are okay, we are stronger, the American with the battleship are here for us, etc., etc., only to get them to sense that they're okay. And I think that's really is important. Any other question? I would love to talk about kids if we have time.
I saw Michael raise his hand. So Michael, are you here?
Yeah, I would like to hear that. Do you have any experience about using humming or tones or meditation sounds while breathing, so to take control over the vagus nerve stimuli? And then that's one thing. And the other thing is I work with first responders and other people who are connected to the security around these, what do you call, in Denmark, by the way, terror threat places, and how to prepare people going on about their job, taking care of themselves, the colleagues, but also the task at hand and the people to protect. So those two questions, if you can come into that. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Michael. Michael or Michael? How should I pronounce your name?
Michael.
Michael. All right. So the first answer is, interestingly enough, you're absolutely right. I didn't think that the humming is important, but then I realized and looked at data from neurological stuff. It does really activate the vagus, and therefore I think it could be useful. The vibration themselves, by the way, not only the vibration, singing itself could be important because it vibrates the vagus as well as sights and look. One of the things that we do when we do mindfulness was ask people to smile and to use, I'd say a friendly facial feature, because it also activates the vagus. So my answer is absolutely, it does activate the vagus. And so sounds of that, let me see. Ready? Could be useful. And then the other thing about preparation, we have a model that is a resiliency model. And we use it before a disaster or, an attack happen. And that goes for emergency personnel as well as kids. And the resiliency model give people, skills in different areas that they can use. Some of that somatic, some of that cognitive, some of it is sort of, faith-wise, meaning-wise. So we have this model, and I'll be glad to share it with you, but I didn't bring it here because there's so much that you can do in such a brief period of time. But yes, and I've been personally training a lot of people around the world actually. Now, did I train any Danish people? No, I don't think so. Though I have Danish friends, but I think that you can train people to work with skills that they can harbor, and then they can use it once they are, dealing with the situation. Also, we often do different. We call it resourcing and we call it ventilation. There's certain group procedure by which you can help people after they work with, whether they're emergency people or, mental health professional. And there's also a model for first aid response, which we have developed also. And again, this is all written on. I'll be glad to share it. That we cannot have time to go over it right now. So I hope I was helpful, Michael. Although I were a little bit vague, time-wise is a limit. Any other question?
Rony,
Yeah.
I think you said something about Hebrew-speaking therapists outside of Israel, but I'm not sure. You talked about how they can help. I'm not sure exactly what you said about that.
Well, I think that the people could sort of organize. The only dilemma is that we have so many people going to so many places, and it takes time to organize all of that technically, But people work with Zoom and different methodologies to work with survivors, different places. Now, I don't know how to organize that. I know that there are some groups abroad that do it, and that could be one way. Obviously, if you are physically in Israel, then there'll be different sites that you can go to. I'm sorry, I'm sorry if I disappoint you, but I don't know how to organize it. I barely have time to organize what we're doing here.
But I think, Rony,
yeah.
I'm gonna jump in again and say again, like for all these questions, then just stay in touch with us because we do work via Zoom a lot. So even if you're not here, you speak Hebrew and you want to be, part of helping, then just stay in touch with us and we'll see what we can do. Rony, Jamie raised her hand. So Jamie.
Hi there.
Hi,
Hi Dr. Berger.
Hi.
Question. We are dealing with lots of anti-Semitism here in the United States. Rallies, hate speech, even, people here feeling disconnected from neighbors and friends because there's a lot of anti-Israel sentiment, not knowing who you can talk to, where your kids are physically and emotionally safe. I was wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm familiar with that. I have many friends in the United States. One, for example, put a name of which is sound an Israeli from Huber because she was afraid it will go. Some people take their. I'm not talking about obvious signs like yarmulkes and stuff of that nature, which is really, really obvious that they have difficulty. I'll tell you what I tell the German people who talk to me about that and ask me what can do. There's no magical thing around that. By the way, in Germany, if you put a swastika or even a Magen David on a house, it's against the law, but you can call the police and they'll do something. In the United States, because there is free speech, it's not the case, unfortunately. But I think that, again, group support is really very important. And group organization, whereby if it's a security issue, and I would assume that there is a security issue because there are more security people who guard Jewish places, shuls and stuff of that nature. But even in the neighborhood, if you can, organize and talk and share with people, that will be helpful. Unfortunately, it's education, and unfortunately, there is anti-Semitism, which is bred in certain communities. And to be honest with you, I don't know how to fight it aside of education for kids and protection of communities. I don't have a genius way of figuring out what to do. Maybe some people here can talk about that and can address it more efficiently than I can. I'm trying though. Ziva, you want to talk?
I just want to say, just for a minute, that someone wrote Jamie, you had a message in the chat saying thank you for bringing this up, that people were shy and didn't feel like they could talk about this. But I think this is part of the reason we're having this gathering, is so that you can feel connected and have a safe place to speak and to be together. So
Thank you.
Yeah, hi. Just want to mention to the person who asked about the Israeli therapists who can speak, who can connect. I know that in New York we had it beforehand, WhatsApp of Israeli therapists in New York. So when these horrific events are happening, we were able to connect to each other and start. If anyone has insurance, and in this area, we're able to work with them, and we do pro bono with people from Israel. Of course, because of licensing issues, we're limited to maybe doing just more support, not real therapy, and that maybe we can get help from you guys in how we can do it, moving forward. And also we understood that the government is starting to pay therapists who used to volunteer in Israel. So we don't want to take the work from them, but we do want to help when there is the need. So we would love to know what is like your organization.
Okay, so stay in touch with us, and if there is a way by which we can utilize your help, and certainly is welcomed, we will be glad to do that. Now,
Yes.
Just one point, and I'll finish. Unfortunately, the government hasn't really yet organized payment for therapists. They're working on now, and hopefully that will be taken care in the next few weeks. You have to register a certain way, and there's a certain procedure. But yeah, I think most therapists by now are doing it voluntary, although there is the Social Security where you can do it there. You have to register. It's an entire procedure. But please stay in touch with us, and we will try to connect you as we going along. Yeah.
There's one more thing, and it's for volunteers. You don't have to be a trauma therapist, but it's called Chibuk L'Israel Balayla, for people who can't sleep, who just need somebody to talk to, who listens to them. So, and they train how to do it. There's a woman who's in Australia. I can connect you with them if you want to email me, but just look for Chibuk L'Israel. It's for anyone who's interested.
Yeah. We do have, not us, but we have good system in Israel of, but if you look at the TV in Israel, there are many, association like Iran and Natal and different ones that I just mentioned that have hotlines and can talk. Not that I'm, disregarding other help, because there's a lot of need now, and we need a lot of volunteers. So. But what I'm trying to say is that this is important, and if you keep in touch with us, we'll find a way to sort of channel it to either us or other organization.
Okay, thank you.
Michael, you have another question?
It's more in a remark.
Okay.
I'm a psychotherapist and a former policeman for more than 20 years in Denmark. I was part of the security detail. The security detail for protecting the Jewish community for 4 years after the terror attack. But according to the anti-Semitic and anti-Muslim question I actually think it's the same thing as we need to humanize ourselves instead of dehumanize ourselves. And what we did in Denmark was we got together with our rabbi. I'm not Muslim. I'm not Jewish. I'm not anything. But what we did was put people together on both sides and not talk about war, not talk about politics, not talk about religion, but talk about people being scared, people being humans. So if people can get together and, find themselves there, maybe that's the start of getting rid of all the anti-Semitic, issues. I mean, I'm a dreamer here, I know. But I think it's important that we stop listening too much about the aggressive journalist and media coverage, and then more seek towards people who want to bring people together as humans. That's what I suggest for those people. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. You probably relate as I am to the de-radicalization center in Europe. There's a big de-radicalization groups that work not only in Denmark but other places. Yeah, there are a lot of ideas around that, and thank you for sharing it. That's good. Would you like me to talk about kids? Should I take 10 minutes to talk about kids, or you're bored already?
Rony,
What's the situation?
if I can just
Yeah.
make a remark. For those of you in the WhatsApp chat that wanted a place that you can change phones and ideas and continue speaking, I opened just for you a group on WhatsApp, so you can join there, and with the link right now in the chat. I will send it also in an email tomorrow morning with the recording of the lecture, so you can join. Thank you.
I can. Since I'm, for me, it's in the middle of the day. I know it's not for others here. I'll take another 10 minutes and talk about kids. Is that okay if I'll do that? All right. A few words about kids. I'm not going to give you long, but I think it's important to remember. Let's see. How do we help children deal with continued traumatic stress? I'll be very brief and let you ask questions thereafter. First, emotional self-regulation of parents. We develop a program that is used for normal daily living with parents. We call it, mindfulness parenting. And one of our slogan is self-care is the best childcare, which is obvious. You don't have to think about it too much. The idea is that if parents can be modulated effectively, meaning they can control the feeling and can transmit a message of safety, relatively speaking, there's no safe completely here in Israel, that would be useful for kids. So my first comment is emotional self-regulation for parents. Secondly, it's very important to convey reliable, not a NED, but ED, child appropriate information. The explanation should be really balanced. It's very obvious. I don't think I can go much into that because all of you know it. You have to talk on the level of the kids and not give too many facts. The problem is, obviously, is how to control the social media. And we know that social media can be helpful, by the way, because it keeps kids together. It convey it's distract people from different things if they look at not at the horrific side at the TikTok or Instagram. So, but I think that we need to teach parents to limit. And, I talk to a lot of parents in different, sessions that I do with them. And I tell them, yeah, there are systems electronically that you can control the kid, limit their time, and explain to them that that many of the stories there are absolutely either propaganda. And we have few examples like that. That I'm very glad that the TV in Israel stopped, where kidnapped kids are talking and trying to have the government. Obviously, they're pushed by the Hamas, and there are some horrific stories, and there are sites that you really don't want the kids to see. So if they can limit that, that could be a good thing. The messages of safety, I think it's very important for parents to be reliable. And so they must give messages to kids that are on the one that real, and on the other way, sort of supportive. Our situation, I'm giving you now an example. Our situation is difficult, but now we are under control, or the government is under control, or the army is currently protecting us. Or when they hear the alarm is indeed scary, because kids says to us, oh my God, what will happen? I'm scared. The alarm is indeed scary, but we will defend ourselves together by going to the safe room, and Iron Dome will probably intercept most of the missile, which is on the one hand realistic, on the other hand sort of comforting to hear it from parents. Maintaining an emergency routine. This is perhaps the most important and also obvious to everybody. So the thing is that even in vacation, like the summer vacation, kids get out of control because there's no routine. But even here in Israel, particularly when school weren't around, although they heard the Zoom, teacher tried to be with the Zoom, I don't like the Zoom at this point, and because I think most kids are like me, are hyperactive and attentive problem. Who cares about learning this time? But, and I say but, it's important for teachers to be in touch. We encourage them to call the kids and be in touch, and it's also important for them to be in touch with their friends in the Zoom. I don't think that's the best way. The best way is to invite each other to houses or to call them. But anyway, a routine is important. Eating, sleeping, etc., etc. Encourage emotional expression. Now, this is really interesting because this is obvious too. However, let me tell you that a lot of questions that I get is from parents that say our adolescents do not want to share with us our feeling, particularly in this house. Now, I've met, for example, in the first few days that I worked, people who lost members of the families, a woman that lost her husband, and she tells me, well, I have a 17 years old who sleep with me, share with me, and a 8 years old who constantly is with me, but I have a 12 years old who never said nothing. And what do I do with that? And I say to her, well, have you tried to go and talk to her? Yes, she threw me from the room. She doesn't want to share. Well, first of all, adolescent don't want to share with his parents. That's not a surprise. But then what I tell her is that you need to not give up. Go and try a few times. And then if it doesn't work, maybe you can share with her what you feel, giving her an example. That would be helpful. And the other thing is that adolescents oftentimes share with their, peers and with their older brother and sister. That could be helpful. Don't push them. When you push them too hard, it doesn't work. And then parents ask me, well, what if I'm very upset and I'm crying? Should I be strong to my kids and not show it in front of them? Obviously, the answer is no. You model how you feel, and by that, you share the normal thing. You can tell them you're sad and you're upset. To a point where you don't throw yourself on the floor. I mean, there's a level of how you do it, but I mean, generally, I think that it's good to share. Show kids warmth. I tell parents that one of the question that I get very often is, well, my 10 years old or 12 years old wants to sleep with me. And I said, this is wonderful. Let them sleep with you. Closeness is good. Don't worry, when they'll be 14 years old, they won't want to talk to you. Nevertheless, sleep with you. Don't worry about it. And you can even ask your adolescent, although they throw you from the thing, love is good, oxytocin is good, oxytocin in English. And not bad idea. Teaching stabilization, relaxation method. I would say that the same technique that I talk about, I often encourage parents to practice it with their kids. Mindfulness practice with the kids, vagal breathing practice, safe place before you sleep, you can practice with your kids. All this could be very useful. I have 10, I'll finish in a second. Encourage children's self-efficacy. That is important. When you see kids finding ways by which they can cope with the situation, whether they help other kids, help elderly, and so just notice it and encourage them. I notice that you share your feeling with your friends. Well done, guy. That kind of thing. Because kids need to know that you support them. Normalize stress reaction. That's one of my favorite, because unfortunately most people don't know how to normalize. There is a slogan that most people say, which is incorrect, by the way. And remember this slogan that everybody says, good response for a bad situation. How do they say it? תגובה טבעית, a natural response for a not unnatural situation. This is bullshit, because some of the people have a non-natural response. By natural is not the right thing, not normative response. If you're the only one who stutter and everybody's around you stutter, if you tell people, oh, this is a lot of time people stutter, that's not the case. It's unusual. Having said that, I'm only suggesting that it's okay to legitimize the the reaction, but it's not enough. There are two other factors that is a good normalization. You need to explain the functional of the response. So, for example, when I saw some guy in Sderot, the missile fell, somebody were hurt terribly, a leg was cut, and he saw it. And people tell me, go and talk to him, and I see him, and he's stuttering. And he's going, stuttering, and I ask him, what's your name? And he go, and so forth. And I say, do you usually stutter? And he says, no. Now, how do you normalize that? If you tell them, well, this is a normal reaction to an abnormal situation, well, that's not the case, because most people do not react like that. But instead, what I told him, listen, legitimize it. It's sometimes happened to people in this situation, but pay attention to me. When I want to run fast, and your body needs the oxygen, so you explain the function of the symptom. The same thing with shaking. People say, oh my God, I'm shaking. Say, let your body shake. You really tremble, and you release the tension of your body. And then the last part, after the functionality of the symptom, go and talk about the fact that in time it's a transient response, and you will see that with time things will be better. When you do that, legitimize the response, A. B, explain the functionality of it, and C, tell them that in the future things will be better. That's a good normalization in my book. Okay? Last thing is identify signs of distress and refer people to experts. What are the signs of distress? Look, we are now in the 5th week, and we are in the sort of arena of the acute stress disorder. Meaning, if you see significant responses or reactions of kids, we need to look at that and potentially refer them to experts who can identify whether they have diagnosed them, not formal DSM diagnosis, but just find out if they stuck and then process it. So what are the symptoms that to me are the most important? The first thing is, as I told you, is the other symptom. It's the way in which the symptom develops through time. If there are the same duration, intensity, or the worsen, that's a problem. We're talking about intrusive phenomena, flashback nightmare, significant sleeping problem. Do you know why sleeping problem is a problem for almost all PTSD patients? Because there are two things that happen when you need to sleep. First, you need to relax your body, right? I don't know anybody that sleeps like this. It's impossible to sleep. And secondly, and more importantly, there's no distraction. All of a sudden, all the things flood to your mind. When you work through the day or you study, there are distractions. But at night, if there's no distraction, you're going to be very tense, and all the flashback will come back to your mind. So sleeping problems almost always highlights a time where you are stuck, startle responses. Any noise that you hear, you jump. It's as if your body is on alert. And affect modulation difficulty, anger outburst, impulsive behavior, or on the other hand, if you're extremely clingy and very detached. The girl who is detached, I'll be very concerned about her, although I saw her in the second day, so she has the time. Or people who are extremely clingy. When this persists long time, let them see an expert, a therapist that know how to work and to process a situation, and they can help them. And I say that because I get oftentimes either kids or soldier or adults years after that, because they didn't identify that, and that's hard to change them. You can still work with them, but it's harder to change them. There's a window of time that if you process experiences, dramatic experiences that are stuck in the first 3 months, chances are it will be relatively easy to get them back to normal functioning. So I would say it's important to identify those at risk. Okay. Hey, you want to donate? Forget about that. Here's my last picture. I love this picture. And here I ask, is there any question? It doesn't work. Well, let me get out of this and let's see if there is any question related to what I've said. And anybody want to ask a question?
There's a question in the chat, Rony. I think it's an important one.
Okay. What is the question? I can see it.
You can't see it?
You might
Okay.
have. Parents, we help. Would it be okay that the person who asked that? It would be nice to dialogue rather than to read. Mati, can you help me? What was the question?
Okay, so Oded, are you here?
Yes, that's me.
Okay, so Ronnie's asking you to just say your question.
First of all, nice to meet you, Rony, and thank you. It was very informational and helpful.
Thank you.
So I represent a nonprofit. We help kids with cancer during normal times. We work with their parents to find life-saving information through wherever the best treatment or expert in the world is. Since October 7, our challenge is that some of our families have been directly affected, but also those who haven't been directly affected, they have challenges with the continuance of care. Could be that the parent is in Miluim. It could be that the car was burnt. It could be that all the oncology departments are underground now, and there's limitations in rooms. Only urgent care is given, and a lot of the care is suspended. So our team, a lot of volunteers, and also our team, they're busy with mainly delivering, providing mental support as much as possible. And that's a lot to take. And my question to you was, how do we as an organization help the helpers?
First of all, it's you do a very important job, and the fact of the matter is that kids or parents are dealing with stress unrelated but very significant, like cancer kids would be very, very stressed because it adds to the allostatic load that I call. I think basically what you need is to, I would say three things that comes to mind immediately. One is to get them together and talk. It's the same thing that I do with families of soldiers. Think about it a second. Soldier or not in Gaza, the family will be extremely concerned. I cannot take the concern away, nor do I want to, because this is realistic. Same thing with parents that work with kids with cancer now. It is a realistic thing. And I think that sharing with each other would be important. And I'm sure you're doing it already. I do think that if you train them with some of the technique that I said, would be important in and of itself. And the last thing is hope. By the way, I didn't mention hope, and hope is a very, very important thing for people who are under stress because we are currently thinking about what we have lost and how things have gone wrong. But I think that when we can open the hope, which is not easy to do, and think about the future and think how things will be and look forward for things that would change and get examples of people who would cope. And I'm talking about cancer now, not just about their situation. And maybe about the fact that I've heard it for people in the South that they are looking forward to build the houses and saying things like, we're going to go back there and make it even a larger settlement, bring more people. That kind of a hope talk, I think, is very important to people because if you're stuck in what you've lost and only in the despair, it's really difficult to handle. So I wish I had better suggestions, but those are the three: hope, coping strategies, and sharing with others. To me, are the three major things that I would say I recommend. If anybody has different ideas, by all means. Okay. Well, if there are any other questions, then that's the time to ask. And if not, I really appreciate all of your concern, support, and if you have personal question, you have my email, you will get it. And you stay in touch with us. And if we can find ways by which to involve you in our organization, I'm sure that we'll be glad to do that. Okay? Any suggestion and question, contact us. Okay. All right, guys. Mati, you want to say a few words?
I just want to say thank you for, Ronnie, for your talk and all this wonderful information, and to everyone that was here. We truly appreciate this gathering and just being together like this. So we send you lots of love and hope for safety, and hope to meet with you in person when all this is over. All right, so good night. And I think you have in the chat, I think Shami just posted the address, like the mail address and the way to stay in touch with us. And yeah, we see all the thank yous. Ronnie, do you see the chat?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah.
Great.
Pleasure meeting you all, and we can use your wisdom too. It's not all the answers, not with me. Take care, guys, and have a good and quiet night wherever you will be.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Stay safe there, over there, okay? Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you from San Francisco.
Bye, bye.
Bye, everyone. תודה רבה.
ימים טובים.
Bye, Mati.
Bye,
Bye,
Mati.
Jamie. See ya.
Good night, everybody.